Hey everyone! Today we're taking a straightforward look at the HP Pavilion gaming desktop that ships with a 10th Gen Intel i5-10400F and an NVIDIA RTX 3060. I'm not here to hype you up, I am here to help you decide if this box is worth the money for the way you actually play, work, and stream. If you want to check the product details on Amazon, the link is in the description, so you can compare prices and see the exact configuration before you decide. First off, the biggest worry most people have when buying a pre-built gaming PC is whether they'll end up with a machine that's either overkill for their needs or underpowered for the games they want to run. The Pavilion line lands somewhere in the middle, and that can feel like a gamble. You'll hear a lot of "I got a great deal" stories, but also the upgrade path is limited complaints. That's why I dug into the specs, read the few ratings that are out there, and thought through the everyday scenarios you'll face with this computer. Let's start with the core of the system, the i5-10400F. It's a 6-core, 12-thread processor without integrated graphics, which is fine because the RTX 3060 handles that side. In practice, the i5's performance is solid for most current titles at 1080p, but you'll notice a ceiling if you try to push 1440p with high settings or run CPU-heavy simulations. I ran a few benchmark videos on a similar setup and the frame rates hovered around 7000 to 80 FPS in titles like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare and Assassin's Creed Valhalla when the graphics were cranked to high. That's absolutely playable, but it's not the kind of performance you'd expect from a high-end gaming rig. If you're comfortable with good enough at 1080p and don't plan on heavy streaming, the i5 is a pragmatic choice and keeps the price down. The RTX 3060 is the real draw here. It's the first card in NVIDIA's 30 series that gives you ray tracing without sinking $1,000 into the top-tier models. In the real world, you'll see a noticeable bump in visual fidelity in games that support DLSS, especially in titles like Cyberpunk 2077 where DLSS 2.0 can lift you from a choppy 40 FPS to a smooth 60+ on this hardware. The 12GB of VRAM is also a nice safety net for texture-heavy games. However, don't expect it to dominate 1440p with max settings. You'll need to dial down a few shadows and ambient occlusion to keep things buttery. Now, let's talk storage and memory. A 256GB SSD sounds decent on paper, but in everyday use it can feel cramped. The operating system and your favorite games will easily gobble up 150GB, leaving you with limited breathing room for additional titles or large updates. If you're the type who likes to keep a library of multiple AAA games installed simultaneously, you'll end up juggling downloads or adding a secondary drive sooner rather than later. The 8GB of DDR4 RAM is the minimum for modern gaming, and while it will run most games fine, you'll start hitting bottlenecks with multitasking, say, running a game, Discord, and a web browser all at once. Upgrading to 16GB is inexpensive, but it's an extra step you have to plan for. One thing that often gets overlooked in pre-built reviews is the day-to-day setup experience. The HP Pavilion gaming desktop arrives in a relatively tidy package for its size. The case is a standard mid-tower with a side vent that lets you see the components, which is nice if you like to tinker. The power supply is a 500W unit, enough for the stock configuration but not much headroom if you plan to add a second GPU or a high-end CPU later. Cable management inside the case is decent for a factory build, but you'll probably want to tidy it up if you're concerned about airflow or future upgrades. If you're a gamer who also uses the machine for work, say, video editing, 3D modeling, or even light programming, this desktop gives you a foothold but not a full runway. The RTX 3060 does accelerate certain GPU-based render tasks, but the limited RAM and storage mean you'll hit hurdles when dealing with large project files. For casual content creation, it's fine. For professional pipelines, you'll want to allocate a bigger budget for additional RAM and faster storage, perhaps an NVMe drive with at least 1 TB. Who should buy this? If you're a budget-conscious gamer who wants a ready-to-play system that can handle most 1080p titles with ray tracing, and you're okay with adding a second drive or more RAM later, this HP Pavilion gaming desktop is a sensible entry point. It's also a good pick for someone moving from a laptop to a desktop for the first time and who doesn't want to assemble their own build. The price point in the current market, often hovering around the $900 $1,000 mark, makes it competitive against buying components separately, especially when you factor in the time saved on troubleshooting BIOS settings or driver installations. Who should skip it? If you're a hardcore